Good morning, everyone. I think actually now it's a little afternoon here. Good afternoon. My name is Gary Rockman. I am known as the real estate rock star. I actually have been doing real estate investing and development in the DC and Baltimore area for the last almost 19 years now. I host a radio show called Connection, which is centered around real estate connecting the dots of wealth, health, and education, social political show on basically solving problems in urban America. And recently I authored a book, Back from Hell and the Devil Didn't Win, How to Free Yourself from Poverty. And I am going to be, I think, the moderator for this portion of the summit. And everyone can introduce themselves.
My name is Chris Bates. I'm the Chief Security Officer for Bitland Global. We focus on land registries built on the blockchain.
Good afternoon. My name is Mbwebe Ashangi. I'm co-founder of a couple of organizations, Black Land Matters, Blockchain Mining Group, and also doing the Natural.
And I'm Derek Hamilton. I'm a professor of economics and urban policy at the New School in New York.
All right. Well, I actually, this subject, I'm actually going to open it up with kind of this piece, because a number of people, one, probably don't realize or maybe have the understanding of how blockchain and real estate actually, there are a number of ways in which it's actually moving in that direction faster than we can speak. One of the things that I appreciate about that is it actually can really start to eliminate the whole idea of gentrification and redlining if used properly and in the right hands. And so I will start off with the fact that of how can we use this technology to better enhance opportunities for low to medium income families in home ownership, to land acquisition, and what are some of the ways that you all see that are happening now, and then how this can even help us to grow wealth in the future with this concept.
On that note, I think one of the biggest issues with low-income groups or individuals is that they don't get in a position where they can own anything. Whether if you take out a mortgage, the bank still owns your house. So this is a spot where we're talking about people who are ending up getting put into 30-year loans that they may never end up paying off, end up getting the house foreclosed. So people who are in these situations are now in a spot where we're getting the industry to a place where people can co-own a space, because everything happens in physical space at the core. So this is where you have to have a piece of property, you have to have a building, you have to have some sort of meeting spot in order to get commerce going in an area to affect that area. And this is kind of where what Bitland is trying to do is encourage local ownership through blockchain, because there is the potential for blockchain to just become a neo-colonialist engine. And what I mean by that is, if you have poor people in an area, it's going to be way easier to gentrify if people can just send money into the area from anywhere around the globe. So in fact, blockchain can become an agent of neocolonialism if we do not pay attention. And this is why what we're trying to do is show people that local ownership is scientifically provable to have better results on your economy. So if people own, they produce 16% more than if they don't own. That's scientifically provable. So these are things where we're trying to show governments, individuals, that the more collective ownership and that you can create, then it's easier to accumulate wealth, having transparency on those lines of ownership.
All right, thank you.
Wow, that's hard to veggie back on. But I first, I'm a historian at the core. I love African history, and I study race relations. And frankly, I believe that the core of gentrification should be synonymous with colonialism. And at that core, we see that we're the least served, underserved. And for me, getting into cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, I see this as an out for us as far as innovatively taking this opportunity to free ourselves. One of the things that I do is my team, what we do is we purchase land internationally and domestically in hopes of creating a intentional community. There's certain parts of America, what's happening in Brooklyn, what's happening in DC is every urban area. So in some case, I'm like, you know, we kind of lost this one. You know, you can kind of have what you have, but let's look at where we can go internationally. Internationally, there are pockets, large pockets of land that is available at wholesale prices for people that are sold that look just like us, but their children don't want the land. And so they want to give it to us. They want to still keep it in the family. These are the type of relationships we're having. We're traveling now, but we're not creating the relationships with the locals to find those opportunities, even some kinship. The next piece that I see is with blockchain technology is that when we speak about mortgaging and home loans, is there's ideas out there like smart homes. We have smartphones, we got smart cars. How about smart homes? Well, smart homes, one aspect could be where you're in regards to cloud mining. If you would cloud mine, that could cut down the residuals of paying your mortgage. So these are things that we're looking at creating to enable us to empower ourselves and create intergenerational wealth.
Before we go, you said cloud mine?
Cloud mine.
So can you speak on that briefly?
Well, it's just there's mining, which is hard mining when you have basically rigs set up in your place, but then there's cloud mining where people can actually buy into a hash rate, so to speak, and get a payout.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So for me, ultimately, it is wealth that begets more wealth. That's the bottom line. I think having, and you know, when we think about wealth and growth, we often talk about it in terms of savings. It's not active savings per se. So it's not you get a check and you decide out of that $100 you save $20. Generally, it's having an asset that passively appreciates over your lifetime.
That's right.
That's how most Americans grow their wealth. So it's the home value appreciation. It's the automatic savings that might come from a professional or managerial job that gives you a pension, right? It is having a college degree without debt that puts you in a managerial or professional position. These are somewhat passive endeavors that are irrespective of your individual behavior. So again, it is getting into a vehicle for asset appreciation at a key point in your life that generates wealth for most people. In terms of Bitcoin and technology, I'd say that technology can be used in multiple ways. On the one hand, we know that technology historically has been used to exploit and extract, but it can also be used to empower. So I think we need to be proactive in making sure that the asset of Bitcoin or the asset of any type of new technology provides avenues or vehicles that empower people rather than extract or exploit. And it's usually those with the least amount of wealth are most vulnerable to extraction and exploiting. And the last thing I'll say is just in terms of, you know, I don't want to give a doomsday story because we know blacks don't have wealth, either in the United States or elsewhere. So does that mean we're doomed? I'd say no, because even in periods when we did acquire economic wealth or power, that wealth was extracted from us. The most recent was the foreclosure crisis when we were sold loans that were problematic even when we qualified for better loans.
That's right.
Other examples historically would be the Tulsa riots, the Wilmington riots. So I'm saying this that you need both political and economic power and they become reinforcing. Economic power can buy political power. Political power can put you in positions to generate economic power. For example, the white asset-based middle class didn't just come into existence. It was public policy like the GI Bill, like FHA loans, like the Homestead Act, that permitted whites to become an asset-based middle class. And they similarly could provide avenues for blacks if they aren't excluded. So what I'm arguing for, and I'll stop talking in a second, is in addition to ultimately economic power, because really it is, like I said, wealth that begets more wealth. We need political power, and that's something for which we do have agency. Voting is important, but it's not the only thing. It would be naive to think that all political power is based in voting. And I can't sit here and tell you in this room how to use and gain political power because you all are doing it, especially the younger generations, in ways that my generation didn't.
Okay, thank you. Actually, so there were a couple of things that were brought up. One is I think the the lack of education, and when it comes to this technology or even being innovative in how in how many industries it can actually be utilized, and two, the actual idea when we talk about, again, gentrification. So just to give a quick little background, I am actually currently working in Baltimore. Actually, I've been doing some partnering with the city to redevelop about 60 houses. So 60 of the vacant houses that they had on there to be raised. They were going to be knocked down. And this is great location. We know that a lot of influx of people from D.C. is kind of becoming the San Francisco, Oakland idea. But again, and as I was sharing with someone out in the lobby, when we talk about gentrification, and so I think you brought up as well, if this idea is even placed in the wrong hands, we know that it can be still problematic. One of the things that you also brought up, brother, was the idea of opening up our mindset, right? Not just thinking the USA, but really thinking globally and how we can have a stake in this and how we can grow real wealth. We've had discussions, I know, with Zimbabwe and the embassy and them discussing things of white congressmen and white senators who bring their constituents over to Zimbabwe to seek out opportunities. And this, again, being on the, this is CBC weekend, but one of the things they talked about was how the Congressional Black Caucus never does that. Right, so its black constituents don't know the opportunities in other parts of the world. So I think there are two things here, right, that when we talk about the gentrification and when we talk about using this technology and actually implementing it, because again, I think somebody was a last panel, or I even heard it yesterday several times as well, is that if we don't act, if we just get the information and we sit on it, then this is still a mute issue. Nothing grows from it. So what are some of the things from an educational point that can not only give us the information, but stimulate us to move on it? And then secondly, how do we then change the mindsets of many of what we call, I call them Negropeans, change the mindset so that this becomes a collaboration effort where we're growing wealth, but not through greed, to where we're still actually implementing colonialism on our own people and in our own communities.
That's a fantastic framing, and one of the things that I think the black community can all agree upon is that we've seen the people who have dominated economic teaching have been the ones that have been able to exploit the current landscape and immediately show a return, whereas something like land is going to be something that returns over years and decades. So it's a lot more difficult to see the immediate, or to see the impact of purchasing a piece of property versus purchasing a kilo of cocaine. So this is where what we have to do is show people how to outpace inflation. People need to understand that inflation is happening minute by minute. Your dollar is losing value constantly. Now, the only reason land appreciates in value is because it produces over time. This is where something like CDs or cassette tapes, there are pieces of technology that are in vogue and then they're out of vogue. So those things create money for a short period and then they stop creating money. Land is not one of these things. So we have to figure out how to explain to people what they need to understand to outpace inflation, have a agile mindset concerning economics, because things can change instantly. The way we're talking about blockchain technology, AI, quantum computing can disrupt that next week. It's not guaranteed that blockchain is going to be here in 5 years or even 5 days. So we have to understand that an agile mindset, an agile approach to economics, an agile approach to communal existence is the only way to actually subsist forward. And we have to get to a point where wealth has to be something that is focused on the lowest. We can't call a community wealthy if there's poor children.
That's right.
And this is where we have to change that mindset. You can have Jeff Bezos, $100 billion. If there are 5 poor children, there's no wealth there yet. And that's kind of where we have to reframe that mindset. So wealth is something that brings up the lowest instead of just the person at the top.
Thank you.
I'm gonna take a veggie back also, but also a little spin. As much as, you know, we all have this Heru in us, this where we want to save all of us. And I think that's can be an Achilles at times, because it's an enormous task. When you think about the situation we're in, it was planned. And they still planning every day. They're planning 10, 20, 30, 50 years ahead. So, you know, what we're planning today, we need to be thinking about, we're trying to catch up, but we also have to think about what's coming next. With that said, I think we should be more into focusing on creating the example opposed to waiting for everybody to galvanize. For those that are doing, just do it. You know, let's just put it together. If it's 2 people and we have something up and running, and now we can show you this is actually working, because that's we're skepticism. We're skeptical about, oh yeah, it sounds good, but are you there yet? What do you have in place? I use myself as an example, you know, in coming into blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. You know, I got in not knowing, but then I said, you know what, the better way for me to show somebody or convince someone is to show them what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
I started learning how to build rigs and showing people that this is a rig, it's working, you see it working, and now they're intrigued because they see it working. The other thing about education, and briefly, is that I think we should be looking more into what's my passion is if you study the history of race relations, then you can see our place and our plight in this world. Read Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams.
Yes.
And it gives you this gentrification is the latest cycle of something that's happened going way back to the days of Kush and Kemet. So what we need to do is stop repeating this cycle. Because we're not doing the history, we're repeating the cycle.
Right.
So do the history, learn the knowledge. You have, and I said earlier, Anthony Browder lives in DC, ikgculturalcenter.com. Check him out. He does Egypt on the Potomac trips. He will give you the information you need about Kemet, so you'll be motivated to realize that this is an ancient old problem that we can fix, but we first have to understand how far back it goes.
Yes.
And then the last piece is how to get folks involved. What I kind of addressed it. Do it yourself first, be an example, and then then the people will follow.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I feel bad because you said your name and I forgot it, but brother.
Chris Bates.
Chris Bates. All right, so I'm gonna kind of agree, and maybe I'm putting words in his mouth and say that blockchain, cryptocurrency, it's not our savior, and it very well may change, and its growth very well could decline like any other type of asset. So that might not be popular at a conference on blockchain, but I completely agree. But to answer the question more specifically, I'm not looking for black people to go to Africa to exploit, and I don't think that's what you are either.
Absolutely.
So we're certainly not talking about simply replacing a current capitalist class that seeks to exploit with black people that also seek to exploit. Now, it would be more just if, you know, with our growing inequality, if we had more black people that were proportionally represented at each level of the rung, that might be more just, because it's more pernicious when you have inequality not just based on class, but race as well. If race becomes a determinant of where you are in the social hierarchy, that's really pernicious. We certainly don't want to live in a society like that. But ultimately, what we want, in my view, or my sense of fairness, is to elevate economic justice, as Reverend William Barber said, a moral imperative. Economic justice shouldn't just be just amoral or something like that. We've talked about human rights, we talked about civil rights, so we should have economic rights. We live in a world with enough resources that especially if you're in America, but if you're in Africa also, there's enough resources where you should have certain dignity so that you can have capabilities to make decisions in your life and achieve those decisions. And some of those things would be a right to education, a right to a job. I support a federal job guarantee in America. A right to capital. I support a child trust account at birth as a birthright to capital, so that when you become a young adult, if you want to invest in Bitcoin, if you want to invest in a home, whatever the hell it is you want to invest in, you have the agency, because it is capital that gives you that agency. It is capital that gives you freedom and choice. So those are the things that I advocate for and desire for. And I think that a lot of that has to be done through politics. I'm an economist by training, but our U.S. government should provide public options to healthcare, public options to tuition-free education, public options to a job, public options to capital, so as that people aren't, especially at the low end of the economic strata, at the whim of a capitalist class that has an inordinate amount of power because of their capital. So when people talk about the market's supposed to discipline the laziest, the least astute, that old deserving poor argument. It is capital itself that can dictate the terms of the market. And people might say, oh, you're sitting up there, you're a socialist or whatever. I'm not picking socialism or capitalism. I'm arguing that we should have a base level of economic dignity, and then after that, go ahead and have deregulation. But then it becomes a misnomer of too big to fail. The next time your actions get you into trouble, the government doesn't bail you out, but your business will go under.
Thank you, Brother Dr. Hamilton. So we want to open it up for a couple of questions.
Two. A couple is two.
Yes, two.
I got to go to the back because I promised them, all right? Couple is two. I don't know. I want to get new people. I have to do that. So let me start with my man here, though.
Very new to this. This is my first question since the conference started. And with gentrification, I'm very, concerned about it. I grew up in San Francisco, and that whole influx to Oakland and everywhere else around the Bay, and
yes,
even me in Charlotte, right? So there is currently something that just been put into place by the federal government, the Opportunity Zone. I don't know if any of you guys
Yes,
are familiar
I'm
with
familiar
that
with
Opportunity
Opportunity
Zone.
Zones.
But it puts us in a place, the way I see it, just the way you kind of coined it, where this technology could definitely put us in a place where we could be gentrified even faster, and even with the economic zone, where you have, again, this power structure of financial kings per se and queens that are able now to take their I guess it would be their their taxes. So it would be their it puts them in a place where they can take their capital gains and now invest where there had one time been a redevelopment agency that kind of went into our neighborhoods, and now it's been put in place where the government has their hands clearly out of it. So I just kind of see this opportunity zone. If we don't put ourselves in a place to kind of leverage our collective body of finance to kind of go back into our own communities, right now we're going to get exasperated. You know what I mean? We're going to get annihilated in our own communities at a pace in which that the redevelopment agencies once did it at a very fast pace, and with the opportunity zone, it's almost going to be 10 times as fast. So, I don't know if you seem like you shake your head and you have a level of understanding. What do you think about all of that?
Well, you bring up an excellent point, and that is one of the powerful things about this whole form of even bringing blockchain, the idea, to real estate. For example, one of the things, and this is, again, I think education is the big piece with this. One of the things that I actually currently do is I actually teach people how to use self-direct accounts in order to raise capital. Many of you all know about 401ks and traditional IRAs, and you left a job and you left it there and it's still there and it's not gaining any money. But there are opportunities in which you can actually put that money into a self-direct account, and you can actually become a lender. You can dictate how it's invested. You can, I heard the panel before, it was about films. You can actually, if you wanted to invest it in films, you could do that. You can invest it in whatever you like. It goes back into your, once you receive the proceeds back, the interest or whatever, it goes back into your 401k. And we have many like hard money lenders or angel lenders who use this platform, right? So again, when we talk about even this technology, there are a number of things which it takes out the middleman, right? It takes out title companies. It can take out even real estate agents if they're not sophisticated enough. So and with all technology, as we know, right, when technology comes into place, even when it comes to computers. many of us in our communities are computer illiterate. That, we talk about, can they read, but can they actually understand computers and how they work and how it's going to really impact their lives, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we are very far behind in that as well. So that's what I speak to when I'm talking about not only getting this knowledge, because we do definitely need to educate, but then as we get this information, as folk leave here today, it's got to also be like a one or a two bullet that you're going to hit to change something. Right, because it's called blockchain, to change and to the link as well as to get a different experience, to have a different outcome. So yes, it can be within the wrong hands, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today, even talking about it, is because we're hoping. Right, that's the same as Brother Dr. Hamilton broke it out to, right? We're hoping at the same time that in this space we have like-minded people who want to see a different outcome in our communities.
All right, before I go on that side of the room, because people, does anybody on this side got a question? I got to do it like that now. I got to be politically correct. I'm going to let the young lady with the glasses over here.
And before she asks her question, just before, I think Dr. Hamilton just wanted to touch on this as well.
So I guess really quick, ever since the Nixon administration, the solution for the black community from every president administration was black capitalism, that will develop black entrepreneurship, and that's supposed to develop the black community, right? So that has been the strategy. And oftentimes they will, as you point out, use things like opportunity zones, or even with gentrification, they use tax incentives for people to buy certain properties. So they are basically under the premise of cajole and bribe the private sector with tax incentives under the notion of some, I call it, a fickle contingency of trickle-down economics. So somewhat self-servingly, again, I still believe that the most direct and parsimonious approach to elevate a community is to provide direct intervention with a public option to a private sector that is almost by definition with the profit motive hell-bent on extraction and exploitation. And that's not making a moral judgment on for-profit entities. That's what they do. They're in the business to earn profit. It is the role of the government, in my view, to be a direct counterweight to that inordinate power that the private sector has.
On that same note, what he just described is exactly what they've been doing in African countries. So it's like they took the colonialist model and just applied it to smaller municipalities. Right. It's the same exact model.
Last question.
Okay, great, thank you. So my question is around land, particularly in the southern parts of the region. In November, there's the Black Farmers Conference, and I will be there. Next week, there's, at the end of the month, there's a conference in Philadelphia, the All Black People's Conference, and I'm just wondering, in terms of the information that you're giving is very important, especially when you look at Pan-Africanist movements, and I'm just wondering, what's your outreach, and how can we bridge the gap between traditional Pan-African communities and organizations and what we're talking about today?
I think this is the connection in the diaspora has been strengthening in the last few years a lot more intensely than it has, I want to say, in the last 30. There was like this, unification in the early 90s, and it kind of fell apart. But now I think we're seeing through the use of technology, Facebook, Twitter, social media, people are able to connect their ideas a lot more. So we're seeing Pan-African, more niche groups emerge, like African black farmers, or African farmers, African doctors, black technologists. So what we're seeing is now we're starting to identify that, yes, there's all of these industries within the black diaspora. Now it's coming together in a way that I think what you're trying to allude to is where do we put our moral center, or where do we put our compass? And I think that's kind of where it's like, there's so many different interest groups now that I think we have to kind of come up with a diaspora set of like maybe 3 tenets that people start to see as like, these are the goals for Black America for Pan-Africans, for the diaspora, to say we're trying to create a more unified existence, we're trying to empower the next generation, and we're trying to create wealth within the community. So if there's like a few goals that we can establish as a diaspora, then I think it'll be a lot easier to bring us together.
If you can have last comment, brother.
Yes. Yeah. To add to that, I think our approach that we're taking is we're not only looking in the motherland, but we're also looking more closely in the Caribbean. In the case of Costa Rica, is one area where we're focused on the Caribbean coast, which is really an hour away from Jamaica. Is that the history there is so rich that Jamaicans had a large part in creating the infrastructure of Costa Rica. And as I mentioned before, they have this thing called Miami Fever, where the children, the descendants of the founders of the land that they were paid in, the children don't want the land, so they've been Americanized. They want to come to Miami and New York and live this materialistic illusion, and therefore allows the French, German, Britons, and everyone else to come in and buy the land, pennies on the dollar, putting things on the table. So as I mentioned, traveling is great. We're all traveling. We see travel posts. I consistently join groups and try to sway the fact that it's nice to put stamps on your passport, but let's bring some flags and let's plant some in the ground. The other piece with blockchain, I meant to mention earlier, is have an outing. As far as it was mentioned, we don't know how long this may last. I hope it lasts a long time. Set yourself a primary goal to make a tangible asset or tangible investment. Land. Say you can buy land in Costa Rica, $10,000. So put in you'll buy some cryptocurrency or produce cryptocurrency and convert that into purchasing land. And then if this thing crumbles, that some people think it will, you have land. You can't take away the land. So that's another aspect that I think we should be looking at is, aggressively telling people, travel is one thing, let's put some flags down on this land.
Yes, sir.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the panel. This was Land and Property Rights, Gentrification, and Blockchain.